Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan, a podcast for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable creative product business with me, Catherine Eardley. The Resilient Retail Game Plan is a podcast dedicated to one thing, breaking down the concepts and tools that I've gathered from 20 years in the retail industry and showing you how you can use them in your business. This is the real nuts and bolts of running a successful product business, broken down in an easy, accessible way. This is not a podcast about learning how to make your business look good. It's the tools and techniques that will make you and your business feel good. Confidently plan, launch and manage your products, and feel in control of your sales numbers and cash flow to help you build a resilient retail business. Welcome to episode 152 of the Resilient Retail Game Plan. I'm your host, Catherine Eardley, as well as the founder of the Resilient Retail Club. And I would love to know if you would like to be one of the first people to join my brand new product business mastermind. I'm so excited about this program. It combines the best of one-to-one mentoring with the magic of working with multiple product businesses who are also ambitious like you, and you can share ideas and thoughts in a mastermind setting. Go over to resilientretailclub.com, look for mentoring, and you've got all the details, and you can even sign up for a discovery call right there on the website. Love to speak to you. We're kicking off on the 10th of July, and there are just a small number of places available. So today we are joined by Jen Fuller, who runs a business called Etta Loves. Etta Loves is a sensory baby brand. Jen's going to explain all about that. But this is an amazing, inspiring story. Jen has built the business up from, again, just like we talked about last week in the episode with Sally at Urban Size. Go check that out if you haven't done already. It's a brilliant episode. She has built up her business from a single idea to an amazing multinational business that it is today. Jen, welcome to the podcast. Do you want to start us off by introducing yourself and your business?
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, so I'm Jen. I'm the founder of Etta Loves, and we are a very unique sensory baby brand. And what's unique about us is we use the science of how babies learn to see and what they can see and what they like to look at to design very precise patterns that we put on baby essentials. So stimulates them and calms them at the same time.
And so that's such a fascinating business. And I know the science behind it's really amazing. So would you say, for example, your muslins are your biggest sellers?
They have remained, a really key seller. I think as we put more things into the range and expanded into slightly different categories, other things will pop up and sort of rise to the surface. But I think the muslins, they were our first products. So we've actually become known. A lot of people refer to us as the sensory muslin brand, which is slightly frustrating when you end up with lots of other extra things. Certainly, they're a really easy pickup. And obviously, you can never have too many muslins as a new parent. And that's very true. So they've certainly remained really, really core in the range for us, for sure.
Amazing. And so can you tell us a little bit about how long you've been going and what's got you started?
Yeah, of course. So it's been going rather alarmingly about 6.5 years
now.
I know. I can track it because it's named after my daughter, my oldest daughter, Etta. And whenever she turns a new birthday, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's pretty much how old the business is, because she very much inspired it when she was it's a bit hazy. She was either 4 or 6 weeks old, and she was obsessed with the jumper I was wearing whilst I was feeding her. I was full of, obviously, a lot of overwhelm as a new mum, didn't even know what I was doing, wasn't getting on particularly well with breastfeeding. So feeding times were fraught. And as she said, this jumper, I looked down thinking, this is a bit different. She's not fussing or, moving about. And she was absolutely locked onto this jumper I had on, which was black and white, kind of mountain zebra type print. And it just gave me the idea, because I looked around and obviously there were muslins on every bit of every sofa, popping out of every bag in every room of the house. And I thought, well, I'm not wearing this jumper every day, much as I like the jumper. I wonder if there's something in whatever this magic is, trying to recreate that in things that she can see every day and that, don't cost as much as a jumper. So that was the inspiration, how we got started. And it's grown from there.
Wow. And what was your background? What were you doing then before you started the business?
Oh, I had a career I loved, which I do lament sometimes when I had a regular paycheck and could nearly switch off at 6 p.m. in the evening. No, not always. I worked for media agencies. So I worked kind of brand strategy, marketing, that side of things. And I've been fortunate enough to, work with some of the world's best and biggest brands. And very different in terms of what that gave me as experience, because I haven't got 10 million to spend on a TV campaign, or, that sort of heady scales. But I've been exposed to brilliant brands and brilliant kind of creative minds, whether that's PR or marketing or media. So it certainly set me up with some skills that I do come back to all the time. But I loved my career.
Yeah.
I certainly wasn't running away or looking for anything to distract me, but here we are.
And so you had this idea, you noticed that Etta was obsessed with this jumper. Yeah. What did you do next?
Well, I was happened to be going off to a baby sensory class, and I had a really wonderful group of NCT friends, and I was one of the lucky ones that, really struck gold with the girls I was paired up with in those groups. And they were really creative. There was a fabric textile designer, there was a designer, there were playwrights, amazing group of women. And I went off to a baby sensory class, literally across the road from where we lived we were in East London in Walthamstow. And I said to them, girls, I'm really tired and we're all a bit exhausted, but I've had this idea. Do you think there's anything in it? Or have I just really overlooked the fact that if this was a good idea, someone would have done this? So how could I have come up with this idea?
Yeah.
And they sort of thought about it and they said, no, I actually think it's a really good idea. So that was the little spark that thought made me go actually look into this. Now, and I've kind of always been one of those people that's had lots of little ideas.
Yeah.
But never had the energy or maybe the passion or enthusiasm to jump into them. And because this one I had not necessarily the headspace, but I wasn't working and my brain was kind of almost wanting something as well as trying to, learn how to be a mum. So I thought, well, let's poke this a bit more. So I had friends that worked within the field of orthoptics. So I kind of I had a friend that worked at the RNIB, and I said, look, you've obviously studied vision. Do you know anyone that might support me in actually putting some real science in this? Because there were some other slightly kind of black and white. They weren't really talking. They were talking about how babies preferred black and white, but no one had really lent into it. And I thought, if I'm going to do this and actually give it a good go, I need it to be the best it can possibly be. So the first step was very much leaning on one of my friends who was a designer to actually help me make repeat patterns. I was all very fine to draw some things, but wouldn't know how to make a repeat. And then obviously trying to find production. So it happened quite quickly, but also it felt really slowly at the time. And it was just a lot of hustle, as it continues to be. Like, who do I know? Post on Facebook. Does anyone know anyone that makes anything anywhere in the world? Like I said, my background, unlike a lot of founders who end up with accessories or clothing brands, it wasn't in buying or merchandise. Yeah. A lot of people have that background. I had nothing particularly useful at that early stage.
Right.
So, it was hustle and a lot of belief, I guess, in the idea.
Yeah. And I love how you just went out there and asked people and you just said, hey, does anyone know anyone who's done this or that or the other? Because I feel like whenever I want something to happen in my business, if I just tell enough people that what I'm working on, then it's always like somebody will know someone who knows someone. It's like there's something to do with that idea of just putting it out there.
What's the worst that can happen? And I think there's probably not a day that goes by where I don't throw something out there or ask or connect and take a chance.
Yeah.
I will try and connect with people on LinkedIn who I think, God, if they ever said yes, this could be awesome. Yeah. And sometimes they do. And then the next thing you're chatting, and the next thing there's a relationship and something beneficial comes out. So I just feel like there's nothing much to lose.
No, I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Just take that attitude. You've got this idea, you've gone out there, you've found people who can help you make it. What kind of give us a little summary of what happened next then? How did it grow?
What happened next? Well, we launched, product arrived, or the stock arrived, and obviously we went we had 2 SKUs, I think, to start with, and it arrived in the UK the week I returned to work. And my job was, having been in the industry for almost 20 years, I had quite a senior role, I had a big team, there was an expectation of me to be all back in again. It wasn't anti-working parents, but I wouldn't say it was a particularly nurturing, understanding environment when you genuinely had to leave to go and pick your kids up. So I kind of felt instantly there was a little bit of a jar there. But I guess I did that thing where I told everyone. I didn't spend any money on ads or anything, but being in the stage of my life I was in, having just had a baby, I happened to know lots of people who were having babies or had friends. So that kind of spread. And because it didn't have a big financial expectation on that first year or so, it was a side hustle. I had a nice salary coming in. I wanted to see if I had proof of concept. Was it interesting? I wanted feedback from people. I wanted people to share how their baby was interacting, make any changes. Was the fabric soft enough? Did it wash okay? All of these things that I felt I was confident would be okay. There's always something's going to go wrong when you don't quite know what you're up to. So it was very much a kind of sit and watch and listen and then refine. And it kind of just grew from there, really. It was a lot of the early days was certainly not spending money. It was leaning on influencers, people like Mother Pucker, who I thought, still thinks amazing. She was around the corner. She was expanding her family. And she was the perfect kind of person to actually, people loved her and believed her and had a platform. And she was very generous with her time and effort in talking about her. So I think the great thing about the brand I've built and the products in particular is they're very visible. Obviously,
right.
no kind of pun intended there, but when they're out and about over someone's shoulder on their pram, etc., people will go, "What's that? That looks different." So they naturally kind of share themselves quite nicely, and they're easy to spot. So I think, I didn't put pressure on myself. I hadn't quit my job. Everything was the same. I just had something else to see what I could do with it. Certainly that first couple of years until I got pregnant with our second daughter was a very slow and steady growth, but I could tell that it was a really interesting, I was onto something, I guess.
Yeah.
But I also had a lot of distractions in work and then becoming pregnant again.
Sounds like you had your hands full.
I was busy for sure. Yeah.
It's interesting you say that about influencers, because I feel like this is something that really, really trips people up. They're like, oh, okay, I'd love to find influencers, but then they just like kind of draw a blank, or they're not sure how to even go about it. So with people like Mother Pucker, was it just literally as simple as she lived around the corner and you got to know her?
Exactly that. And I do feel like it's changed considerably. The impact that an influencer mention would have on sales almost immediately or on follows just is really not there anymore. I certainly don't find. I'm sure it might be different in different categories. With Anna, she lived locally. There was a baby market. Obviously, I was pushing my wares at any kind of baby events in East London. There was a baby market in Leighton where she was living at the time, and I just dropped her an Instagram message. We followed each other and said, "Look, if you're around, it'd be lovely to meet you." And she popped along, and we had a chat, and then just chatted every now and again. And she was just, well, she is a very, very lovely lady. So I happened to find a really nice person who genuinely liked what we were doing. But I think now it's a lot harder. We do have an influencer marketing kind of strand, but the expectations are not, that if that person gets it, the business is built. You're done. Yes. You're, payday kind of thing. It just doesn't happen. It's such a combination of kind of things you can't almost unpick, I think, these days. Yeah. Rather than the spikes that we would really clearly see.
Yeah, for sure. So going back then to the story, I'm so enjoying the story, because I also think it's really important to challenge this notion that people have sort of success overnight as well. I mean, you're talking about a couple of years here where it was sort of slowly building and you were testing things, and it wasn't like you just launched it and bam, that was it, right?
Absolutely.
So what kind of were some turning points then? You talked about, obviously, you were then pregnant with your second daughter. So you presumably had some sort of maternity leave with her. And then what sort of happened next in the business?
So I think there's been turning points that have been driven by my desire to make it a success. So whereas I always believed in it and was really passionate, I had a limited amount of time to spend on it. When we got pregnant with Uma, I said to my husband, look, I'm not sure. I think this might be the time to really put all my efforts into Etta Loves. Can we afford to do that? Because that's obviously as a big salary dropping off a cliff. Am I being silly? I could see enough potential that I felt like it would be kind of silly not to try. So we said, let's give it a year, have mat leave, and then don't go back. But use mat. Well, I obviously said he didn't dare say use your mat leave and work really hard. I would have been like, no, thank you. But I knew in my head, I was like, I'm going to see what I can do in mat leave, depending on whether she ever naps or whether what kind of baby she was temperament wise. But she was generally quite chilled, so I'd get quite a lot done in a day, on some days, of course. And I gave it that year, and I pushed and I pushed and I pushed. And in that year, we launched our Peanuts collaboration with obviously the comic strip Peanuts. Amazing. And things started to happen. We had some lovely stockists. We've got stocked at Natural Baby Shower, and people who weren't sort of really big hitters that were going to, again, you're not going to double my revenues at all or do anything particularly significant, but they gave me another level of confidence, I guess, that I was onto something and I was on the right track. And it just grew again. It's been slow. It's not like I've had one of those moments like some people have a shout out from Solomon or whoever.
Yeah.
Still some influencers where they go, it doubled overnight. I haven't had any of that. It's been a lot of hard work, a lot of really planning. What should the range look like? How do I get people to come back? Because I obviously have a funnel I have to keep filling with new people who are pregnant with a baby. It's not like I'm a clothing brand and I keep them and they grow out to me at age 9 or 10. I I have to work really hard to keep filling that. So it's incredibly important that we create ranges and products that people want to, you almost prove they work with the first purchase. They come back and buy, a nice complementary product and then turn them into gifters until perhaps they have baby number 2 or they become grandparents, whatever it might be. So it was a lot of just looking inward at the business and going, right, let's actually take this seriously. No, I wasn't, but I didn't have the headspace to go, I want to look really properly at my margins. I want to look at the quality of this. What are my aims?
Yeah.
I want to be organic cotton. When can I do that? What's the tipping point for me to be able to absorb that cost? So it was just still slow and steady, but building momentum. And obviously, alongside having a second baby, and Etta was only 2.5, it was still a real handful at work. But I've had a very patient husband who, again, has also been very believing in what I'm doing. Absolutely give it a go. Now, obviously, what then happened was the pandemic. So in a way, I don't know what would have happened if it, been a normal pace, but that accelerated sales for a year and a bit, but then also messed everything up in terms of forecasting. So
yes.
It's really hard. It's really hard to look back and go, this is what's happened, or what I've done versus what's been caused by external forces. But I think the tipping points were certainly peanuts was a really interesting one for me. And we did a collaboration with Cowshed and Soho House Group, which was great. Not big either of them in terms of sales and revenue, but really big in terms of elevating Etta Loves as someone to kind of keep an eye on. It said something about the brand, and I was really proud of those. And then the other key moments for us, I guess, have been the collaboration with Keith Haring, the foundation. So as an artist, I've always been a huge admirer of his work and the work that his foundation does after, obviously, his passing. And this collection is just so unique in the baby market that it absolutely is the kind of the core of what we're about.
Yeah.
So I think that's, really opened us up to all sorts of people and all sorts of retailers that go, wow, that's a kind of a cool brand, actually. And that's a really cool collaboration. So it's all the culmination of a lot of hard work, a lot of hustle. Like getting stopped in John Lewis earlier this year. I first emailed John Lewis and got a reply 5 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And it was hugely positive, but they just said, well, you're small, you haven't got enough of a range, let's keep talking. Okay.
And you kept talking.
Yeah, but you barely keep talking from year to year because they have a churn of people.
Yes, for sure.
Think, oh my gosh, I haven't tried John Lewis recently. And then even then when they say, oh, we like you, it took ages to actually then end up on the shelf. So I think this notion that you can build a brand overnight, it can happen, but it's hugely unusual.
Yeah, for sure. I love so much about what you said. I just want to pick up on a couple of things. I really liked how you said about time to take the business seriously, because I was just having this conversation with someone last week about, sometimes I feel like small business owners, but kind of like the mental side of running a small business is so important and so critical to what happens. But I also think there's a lot of people who have, especially creative businesses, especially when they sell what I call like lovely things, right? Feel like there is this almost feeling that people don't expect them to take their business seriously or themselves seriously, or lots of people might say, oh, what's that little project thing you're working on, like that sort of thing. And I think there's so much power, like you say, in that moment when you say, I'm going to take this, I take myself seriously, I take my business seriously, and I'm going to operate as a business. And it's not saying you have to emulate the way a corporate business works, but it's almost like that sort of real ownership, or that sort of sense of pride of, right, this is my business, and therefore I'm going to really look around and look for opportunities. And the other thing I was just wanting to say to you as well was, it sounds like you proactively have gone out and found some amazing collaborations. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about how those came about.
Yeah, of course. So from memory, Peanuts was a while ago, probably 4 years ago, but from memory, they emailed me and I just went, oh my God, well, the licensing company did. And I sort of fell off my chair. And to be totally honest, wasn't a huge Peanuts fan, but knew we could do something really fun with the artwork they had and the designs. And it was the 75th anniversary, perhaps. I might have got that number wrong, but it was an anniversary year. So they were obviously, we were going to be in good company with some other great brands globally to do a celebration of Peanuts. So that came about like that. Keith Haring, we were meeting Peanuts at some licensing expo, which is slightly like my idea of hell. Lots of people, like lots of cosplay type stuff walking around a giant exhibition hall. It's very overwhelming. But as I walked past, one of the stalls that was really, of the stands that was really small, was this lovely, just obviously very striking Keith Haring stand. tiny, the smallest space they could have in the exhibition hall, where everyone had, rotating stages and dancing. It was all a bit crazy. And I just looked and went, oh my gosh, how have I not thought of Keith Haring? So I've always been a massive fan of his work. So went up to this guy who's a slightly stern New Yorker with all my enthusiasm, going, oh my gosh, I do this thing. And he was like, what? And he said, well, here's my card. It sounds interesting. We struggle to find baby brands to work with, and it's a category we're really interested in. And again, I can't remember, because life is a blur, how long that took, but possibly 6 to 9 months to just thrash it all through, agree the terms of the licensing deal. And then here we are, and we've just extended it. We've done 2 years, came up for renewal in January, and they asked us to extend for another 2. And again, it's not necessarily the best-selling range, but it offers such a really clear aesthetic. So cool that actually so many customers like it, but also the press love it.
Right.
And it's what made me take that leap and open our warehouse and website in the US. Because that was his primary kind of market.
Oh, wow.
In his place of birth. It felt like a time to, possibly a bit early in our journey as a business, but it felt like a really missed opportunity to not try and break the States.
So when did you open the US warehouse?
That was 2 years ago in April, so just past the 2-year anniversary. So right bang slap in the middle of COVID, all very tricky, all very expensive, because we had to open up an LLC. You can't really trade over there sort of in a distance way because of all the legalities, the tax, the insurance, everything has to be done. It's like having a totally separate business, to be honest.
Wow.
And one that is hard. It's, the ads don't work in the same way. They don't seem to. The market is almost like multiple countries in one, the taste across one region to another.
Yes.
Shipping costs are extreme. Everything costs more because wages tend to be higher. So it's been a real learning curve that, like I said, naturally, I probably wouldn't be launching in the States right now, where I would have got a rep to do it, or I would have maybe done another way, but it just felt like a really, the right time to do it, perhaps. Jury's out.
Jury's out. Okay. So I just wanted to ask you then if there were any big setbacks. I mean, we talked about, some difficulties, but are there any moments where you just thought, you're like, what the heck do I do now? Or just kind of difficulties that you had to overcome as you grew?
Oh, absolutely. I think I had one very early on, which was a production setback, but actually it ended up shaping the range to what it is now. And it was originally we were going to do 3 age ranges. So it was going to be 0 to 4, 4 to 8, and 8 to 12 months, because we designed age ranges based on infant vision ability. And the 4 to 8 month came back, and I'd chosen like a Ferrari red, because red's a really brilliant colour for babies. We now know a lot more with all our research, but at the time it was, based on the best available research.
Yeah.
And when it came back, the stock completely signed off. I don't know how I didn't have a sample, or maybe I just missed it. And again, the fog of juggling everything and having a 6-month-old baby, it was just like a dried blood red.
Oh no.
And unfortunately these days, it probably is quite a nice colour palette. It was a real kind of paprika-y red. I just looked at it and it was a leopard. No, it wasn't a leopard. It was a snake print. It was absolutely stunning. But all I could see was dried blood. And once I'd seen that, I was like, you can't give this to babies. So I was in a massive panic. So I was like, well, what have I done? This is the range. I don't know what to do. I've spent obviously my own money on this stock. And I spoke to Laura, our orthoptist, and went, look, what can we do? And she's like, well, actually, if we can reprint the older age range, which we hadn't got as many of, because obviously we knew we were mostly going to capture early little babies, we can redesign that so that has the stretch from 5 onwards.
Right.
So immediately took out one of these age ranges, and actually it's turned out to be the best thing ever, because not only were we launching a product in a market that didn't exist. So when sensory muslin, we invented that term. They didn't exist. We were for the first time ever asking people to shop a category by age, which you didn't normally shop by age.
Right.
So that panic, and I remember at the time being in absolute shock horror. Oh no, this is because I'm so rubbish. I'm naive. I don't know what I'm doing. I shouldn't be doing this. It ended up coming good. The other thing, I guess, the other growing pain has been cash flow.
Right.
And I've said to people, if I ever get out of this business, don't let me do another one that's product. Let me see if I can sell my time, because honestly, it's always trying to trip me up. And I think speaking very honestly, I was going to look for investment at the beginning of this year, because we've got a really big year. We've, like I said, taken on some big retailers in John Lewis and Jojo Mama Bebby, and we're in Selfridges, and we've got more hopefully in the pipeline. And America eats up a lot of money, and it doesn't quite sort of, bring much back to the table yet. And cash flow just keeps me awake every week. It's like, how am I going to pay that thing tomorrow? And something always just about comes through, and the payment is made and the invoice gets paid. But obviously, with the big retailers comes worse payment terms and an even bigger widening between me paying for stock and me actually getting money for that stock.
Yeah.
So for investment earlier in the year, and I didn't particularly go, I went in wholeheartedly, but I didn't spread it too thinly. And we got really far through conversations with an amazing couple of potential investors. And then they decided not to in the end for lots of reasons, which I do understand from their side. But it absolutely took the wind out of me. I'd entered into this year thinking, this is our scale year, this is growth, we're in a really good place, we've got all of these things coming. I'm really proud of this business. I can do it. What would be really helpful is some money to just take away that pressure and enable me to fast track some of these projects. And I went from that feeling of almost putting myself a bit forward a few months, feeling calm, going to get easier, to it just being whipped from under me. And that's been really painful. But again, what that did, and like we say, these things always have and I believe things happen for a reason. I think you kind of have to believe that. Otherwise, I'd find life quite hard, I think. What it did was the actual process of going for investment meant I had to get so close to my numbers.
Right.
And, oh my gosh, that was fascinating. Horrible in many instances. Eye-opening, slightly alarming, but also overall really positive, because now I've remained really close to my numbers.
Amazing.
And the other thing, it's just I had to find an alternative strategy and go, well, let's look at this business and let's go, where do I get cash flow from? What changes do I need to make? Where tighten the reins and all those things. And that's been really positive. So I'm not saying we wouldn't want investment at some point in the next couple of years, but it's just slightly changed the course again, which has been for the best as I sit here right now at this point.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting what you're saying about the process of going for investment, because that is a conversation that I often have with people. And, this kind of like, should I go for investment? And I do think the process, the kind of rigor of it is really important. And obviously a lot that I talk about in things like the book, Tame Your Tiger, about knowing your numbers, and that is all stuff that you're going to get asked if you go for investment. So the process itself is almost like, I was going to say like training for a marathon or something. Like, it's worth, sometimes it's good to do it because, at the end of it, you're still much fitter than you would have been if you hadn't.
Yes.
But ultimately, whether or not you actually run the marathon, maybe later, maybe not, but you've learned an awful lot about the business and it will make you that much stronger. Also, does it help you feel like you can do this, as you said, like you can stand on your own 2 feet? It doesn't necessarily need to have that investment for it to progress.
Absolutely. And it's given me focus on where are there areas in the business that if I grow those, it eases everything else, rather than, trying to keep the UK running. We've just launched in Europe 2 weeks ago in a warehouse in the Netherlands and a new website. Okay, it's like, what does that have to do? And let's be more rigorous about our targets of what is the the right number for Europe, and what do we do if we don't hit that number, and how do we ensure we do?
Yeah.
And all of those sorts of things, and understanding what the US has to deliver,
yes,
and how to get that money back into the UK at appropriate times, but also growing the US business. And I think it's really made me look far more strategically, rather than just going, we're now in these 3 locations, let's just throw everything at it and see what happens. I'm now thinking about them as very not separate businesses, but slightly different business models within.
Yes. Yeah.
And feeling that that's okay. I may not quite know how Europe's going to pan out, whether we'll be wholesale first or direct, but that's okay. And the US is operating very differently from the UK in terms of where the bulk of revenue and sales come from, but that's okay. And I think it's just knowing that every day I start my day not knowing how I'm going to achieve something. But every evening I've worked it out. Mostly, I've found someone to help, which is a really key thing in how I operate. This is not just me. This is about, I've always asked for help.
Amazing. Well, I think it's an incredible story to think you started with this idea 6.5 years. I know you say it sounds like a long time, but really, considering you've gone 6.5 years from this idea to the prototype to now operating in 3 separate markets. I mean, that's quite incredible. And big retailers, like you said, all these stockists that you have and these big collaborations, I think that's really amazing. So final question, what's next?
Well, we have some lovely new extension products to our Keith Haring collection coming in autumn winter. So really excited about that. And I'm working on our next collaboration. So I'm working really hard. I'm at the hustle stage. So I've found my shortlist of who I'd like to work with and now hustling. And I think for me, it's that finding that combination of kind of print collabs like Herring is, but also product collaborations, I think is going to be a really interesting area, not from a revenue point of view, but from a brand awareness and expertise point of view. So there's a lot. I don't stand still very often here. I try and keep positive and keep motivated. It's not always easy, but it's how I've ended up still with the business, I guess, and we'll see what comes next.
I love it. Do you want to finish off by telling everyone where they can go to find out more about Etta Loves?
Of course, thank you. Yes, so we have website ettaloves.com. It's us.ettaloves.com if you're in the US. It's eu.ettaloves.com if you're in Europe. And we're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, etc. as just Etta Loves. You'll probably find us.
Thanks so much for listening, and thanks to Jen for sharing your incredible story. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I certainly did. Why not head over to @Resilient Retail Club on Instagram? Let me know what you thought. I also love to see when you share your pictures of where you're listening when you're listening to the podcast. Of course, if you have a moment to rate and review the podcast in iTunes, it makes all the difference in the world. Similarly, if you rate it inside the Spotify app. And of course, if you follow or subscribe to the podcast, you will be the first to know about each new episode. See you next week. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, then I invite you to check out resilientretailclub.com. The Resilient Retail Club is the membership for anyone wanting to start, grow, or scale a profitable product business. No more trawling Google trying to find the answers to your questions or wading through general business advice that speaks mainly to service-based businesses. Whether you're still at the idea stage or you've been going for a while but want to get more focused and organised when it comes to your business, the Resilient Retail Club is the place for you. With a library of courses tailored to creative product businesses, several live sessions a month, and a supportive and active community, the Resilient Retail Club is the perfect membership to help you hit your goals faster. Check it out at resilientretailclub.com.